Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Evil. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, the main crux of this episode revolves around a particular stretch of highway, which is kind of considered haunted. It's interesting how this case actually got brought to the church by what's her name, Jacqueline, I believe, and the church wouldn't give it to their assessors because they had so much on their plate. It is so interesting. So I guess that means they kind of pick and choose which cases I guess maybe take a little more priority with the team or not. Because I mean, maybe at the very least it would have eventually gotten to them, but who knows. But Jacqueline is worried about her husband, that after he took like a particular route, because he's a truck driver, he hasn't been quite the same. And he talks about this particular stretch of highway he went on, and that he saw something following him. He thought it was a drone, but it didn't move like a drone. And just like he eventually ended up losing like 8 hours. And he was like, I don't know what happened in that time frame. Apparently he stopped at like a rest stop and apparently got something, but he doesn't remember it. So it seems like it's a it's a known thing between these very particular interstate highways. People will actually go out of their way to go around it because it seemed haunted. So they take this particular highway, and Ben, and he kind of finally I love he plays a song and it's like, oh, this is your mom's favorite song. It's like, yeah, one time we were on I think he said they were on a trip and it was the song that was kind of stuck, so it kind of became his mom's favorite song. And Kristen comments on how happy she is that Ben's doing good, and he talks about what he went through last episode of my sister introduced me to some people and they worked on helped me figure out some stuff. Turns out the angel from season 1, turns out it is a thing of you could use an app or whatever to make it an angel pop-up or something like that. And it's like, okay, that's all there is to it. Which Kristen notices that David seems disheartened by it. She's like, oh, I thought you wanted it to be real. He's like, no, but it's I think on some level he did, because especially with everything that goes down this episode, I think David kind of, when you kind of take the wonders of the world out of it, when it no longer becomes something supernatural, it makes you go, it takes a little bit of the wonder out of the world. I mean, because that's always that interesting conversation when it's science meets religion, where some people are like, well, science, isn't necessarily the admission of the absence of God. It's kind of, because for some people, once again, some people can find that balance of being science is God's way of explaining stuff to us. Then not everything can be explained, but at least some things that can be explained, it's it's just it is God gave us science to be able to explain stuff. That is part of his, what he does. So it's there are people who lean, okay, either God over science or science over God, but I do think there are people who exist in the middle who have both, who for them it's God explains science, so I think that's kind of what happened there with David, where it's just kind of oh, he thought it really was an angel of something miraculous. Because I think it takes away a little bit of right, if it could be explained, because that was one of those earlier cases that kind of sent them down the path that they are on now. So it takes a little bit away from some of their adventures, I guess, to some extent. But on the way there, their radio got interfered with, and of course it's going to be on 666, because of course. Then they see the thing following them. Obviously, they're freaking out, worried. Ben hears his name, which I would admit with what his sister said. It's yeah, but to be fair, Ben's a very generic name. And I shouldn't say just generic, but it's a common enough name, yes. Because generic just sounds meaner than I mean it to be. It's just a very common enough name, but it's right. He just happens to say Ben in a car that has a Ben. It's right. Which Ben's explanation later on is right, someone must have had hacked into the radios or whatever, or their phones, and be able to hear Ben's name said, because, yeah, Ben's name was said in that time, so. But yeah, it was an experience that freaked him out. I mean, the electronics of the vehicle shut down, and it's you can tell Kristen's freaked out. And I love Ben's getting out. She's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to check the hood of the car. She's like, don't do that. That's the start of 100 horror movies, Ben. They check it out, but the entire time Kristen's super unnerved and freaked out. Luckily, the power kicks back on and they leave, and it's just like, okay, this is super weird. And even Ben's like, yeah, someone's like fucking with us. And so he ends up getting his sister's help because he starts thinking like, right, people like took short waves and I don't understand, like, I'm not smart enough to fully understand the technical side of it, but basically using shortwave frequency, someone had to be close enough in proximity to basically mess with anyone on that highway. So later on, when they're investigating, Ben's like, okay, I'm gonna check for these shortwaves, and it's a particular frequency that's like 18.9. Once you hear that, like, it gives you this like, it kind of taps into the fear parts of your brain, and you might start seeing things, which David's kind of disheartened by that because he had an experience later on that road because Jason, Jacqueline's husband, ended up leaving, and she couldn't get in contact with him because he was like, oh, something's following me, and he thought he hit something. Well, David does that. He goes on that road, and, you know, he sees the eyes again, and he ends up hitting something, pulls over, and he sees a demon eating something. But I'm like, didn't they see that demon last season? That might specifically have been the cannibal. That might not have been a cannibal one. Maybe it was, maybe, I don't remember, but, like, there was a demon that was, like, hatched or whatever. I'm like, isn't that same demon? Because, like, David ran from it last season. I don't know. Like, they didn't show a, like, flashback to say whether or not it was, but I feel like that might have been the same one. But then he runs, and there's a bright light that scares it away. At first, I was like, oh, it's going to be a vehicle, won't it? Well, it eventually turns into the, Jason's truck. But before then, like, a slice happened, and then it opens up, and there's, I guess a saint, because she's got a sword, shield, and, like, wings, and she kind of looks at David and smiles. I was like, what the? I was like, oh, why do I keep thinking what the fuck? It's like, it's this show. Stop being surprised every time. It's just like, this show does such a good job at being weird that it just kind of, like, when it just hits you with like that, because it was like, like, not, I guess animated might be the word. I wasn't expecting that to be, so it was like, oh. And so later on, he talks to Andrea about it, and she's like, well, you've seen Saint before. He said, but not like today, an angel before. But it's like, yeah, also, because I remember saying this last season, that angel looked more like a Shinigami from Death Note. So, because that was supposed to be like the Archangel Michael, potentially. So it looked different from this. He said that was one thing, which I think it's funny, because he's like, yeah, this looks more real. I'm like, even though it was kind of animated compared to like that, which was kind of a little more real, you know, I think that's interesting. But David's in that complicated spot where he's not sure what to fully believe, because he's like, yeah, like, I've had visions of stuff like that before, but he's also like, how do we know what we're seeing is God and, like, not something else? Because I think he's probably thinking, like, who's to say this isn't something demonic messing with us? Because Andrea saying, like, because he's like, yeah, I'm not a good person. Because she's like, right, I told you when you became a priest that demons would come after you and their attacks would be a lot more physical. But the flip side to that works too, that the saints would become more real, like the holy would become, because kind of almost being like, you're a holy person. But he's like, I'm not holy, because he gave into his temptation. Even if it was all in his head or not, which even he doesn't fully know, he had sex with Kristen. Like, that's why he's like, oh, I was tempted. But she's like, but you didn't give into it. It's like, well, he did have sex with something pretending to be Kristen. But once again, whether that was 100% in his head, whether that really was, it's that territory with, like, the succubus and George and the sex. Like, who knows, like, how much of that is them physically being there, how much of them is just projecting themselves in your head. Either way. So now he's wondering, like, what if something's pretending, like, oh, like, it's messing with my head, making me think I'm seeing something holy when actually, he didn't go exactly down this route, but he was kind of alluding to, like, what if it's something demonic misrepresenting itself as something holy just to kind of mess with me, to make me think, like, oh, I'm good, I'm okay, when in actuality I'm that deep at, like, I'm super deep in the dark side of things, and it's just making me believe that I'm, like, on the lighter side of things, that the light's looking out for me. Like, it's the darkness misrepresenting itself as light. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. And even going as far as saying, yeah, but who's to say, like, it isn't just in our head? Like, aren't we all just kind of in our own mind? So who's to say, you know, it's real or not? But because I like how this also ties into Kristen's story this season. I mean, this episode in particular too, because early in the episode, the moment that guy came up to Kristen, I was like, who the hell is he? And I'm glad they gave us a flashback. I was like, oh, dude, she laid out in the grocery store. I was like, right. I was like, I completely forgot about it. Her kids egging her on, like, yeah, hit him. And I was like, part of me's like, is that just them, or is that a little bit of their Cheryl's influence in that regard? all of them, it makes me seem like it's just them, because I think they were probably really proud of their mom to do that, because it's like, yeah, that guy was an asshole and mom laid him out. And so she does kind of apologize to the guy, and I was like, I wonder will that become more of a thing. And the fact is, he rolls up to her place and he's recording. I was like, she didn't have to apologize. She shouldn't have had to apologize, because for one, it's already done. We moved past this. You got laid out. You got embarrassed. That's most likely what this is about. There might be a little maybe like demonic influence on why that happened. Like maybe there's a part of my brain that's like, I don't know, like, because Kristen asked Cheryl later on, it's like, oh, did the girls tell you about that? And she's like, no, what happened? It's like, does Cheryl actually know? Did they set that up just to kind of put... I don't know, because like obviously she sent Andy away. Eddie and Leland were behind all that. So who's to say this couldn't be further manipulation? And then when Lexus came to her being like, why'd you apologize to that guy? It's like, I was kind of in the wrong. But it's also like, that SOB tracked you down. It's like, he found your address somehow, showed up at your house. It's like, and he's like putting a phone in your face, like wanting you to apologize. I'm sure that's potentially going to come back around. But I'm like, yo, she said like, get on my property, or like, because she felt guilty about it. But that's why Lexus was like, why is it boys can do whatever they want to, but the moment like a girl steps out of line, it's like, it's an issue. She's like, yeah, but like her mom tried to justify it, being like, yeah, I was kind of in the wrong there. But it's like, yeah, but he's in the wrong doing for what he did. I mean, for one, he shouldn't have ran his mouth off like he was. He shouldn't have been a dick. It's like, yeah, once again, talk shit, get hit. You got to accept it doesn't make, I'm not saying it makes it right, but it's like, yo, you got to accept the consequences. You talk shit, there's a good chance you talk shit to the wrong person and you get fucked up. That's the general rule of life you just kind of have to accept. So, yeah. Take the L, move on. The fact is, because who knows like how much time has passed in between then and there. So it's like, for you to do that now too, roll up on someone's house like that, like, because it's one thing if he was going to press charges or something. It's like, no, he just like rolled up and was like, oh, I want to apologize. That's why I feel like there's more nefariousness behind that. Jeez, couldn't get that word out. So, we'll see. But that kind of got her starting to think, because she ended up talking to Cheryl. It's like, okay, mom, like, how did you teach me to be independent? It's like, well, it's like, right, well, you wanted to mountain climb, I let you climb. And she's like, well, oh, you didn't have an issue with that? It's like, well, yeah, but it's like, I never told you what I really thought, because I knew that because children in general will do this. You tell a child one thing, they're always going to do the opposite of it. So I'll never tell you what I really thought, because I knew if I did, you just do the opposite of it. So, but also when it came to boys, it's like I always try to set a better example for you, because you, someone that broke a lot of hearts but never got your heart broken, simply because if a guy didn't show up on time, you kick him. If he didn't call you back within 30 minutes of you calling him, you kick him, because it's like, right, you're on your time, not his time. You dictate things. It's a situation of like, you're the one that sets the pace. Don't let the guy be the one that sets the pace. So she ends up talking to Andy about it later on, and Andy didn't really know how to respond, because she was kind of conflicted, because she was talking about this situation where, was it up to like 13 girls kind of have this independence, but then it's kind of this situation where that kind of, I think maybe it's a societal thing. Maybe that's what she's getting at, or maybe it's just I feel like it had to be like a societal influence to it, but basically saying that girls kind of like back away a little bit from that independence, like on a more statistical level, and just kind of go along with kind of what's kind of so. I think Kristen wants to find that balance of, I don't want to go like buck wild, but I also want to kind of step a little out of that comfort zone and just kind of be a little more free spirited, just not get too wild with it. And Andy was like, oh, we'll talk about it Thursday. And that kind of annoyed her, because it's like, okay, so it's just a conversation I have with my mom. It's like, no, you don't get to dictate the terms of this. So it's like, right. And then she looked up a video of her video. I thought she was going to read comments, but she was looking recommended videos. And it's a lady saying like, why she loves Sasha Fierce. Which I'm like, well, I'm not the most well-versed Beyonce person. My connection to Beyonce has always been my niece. I don't even know if my niece is as much. My eldest niece was obsessed with Beyonce. I don't know if she is as much, because she's now obsessed with, I mean, I think the same thing could still apply, because she's obsessed with, Whitney Houston. Like, it's all Whitney. Like, she plays Whitney's music all the time. She like looks at any documentary or any videos about Whitney, and also got her book and everything. Like, my niece is got vinyl records of Whitney stuff. That's how obsessed she is. She never even went that hard into pain about Beyonce, but I think the same thing could be applicable. But it's like this woman was like, yeah, like an interview between Beyonce and Oprah. She's like, yo, like these two goddesses come together, and it's like, right. I used to not feel comfortable dancing, and Beyonce talked about anything she wanted to do. She became Sasha Fierce, and Kristen applies that. So she goes like, yo. Kind of creates like a more badass free version of herself. Like I don't know if she's quantifies it as, oh, I'm creating a persona or I'm just going to enter my fierce state. Well, you know, whether she'll kind of slip back and forth or whether this is going to be Kristen all the way through the season, but she puts on her boots, strikes her, like, you know, puts on her fierce look and confronts the contractor being like, yeah, you're going to have to pay us a second check. She's like, why? It's like, yeah, I talked to your husband about it before we even get to the plumbing on it because things are a little more expensive. And she's like, no. And he's like, well, if it's going to be no, then we're going to stop. And she's like, okay, I'll find a different contract. He's like, no. You're going to pay us for the work. She's like, no. He's like, I already laid the contract. He's like, okay, then I'll just find a different contractor. And he started getting, and she's like, no, can you wait a minute and then repeat what you just said? And it's like, okay. So she wanted to make sure her girls were in front. Picked up the hammer, start tearing down. It's like, oh no, like I haven't paid you for this already, so who cares? So I can destroying stuff that I haven't paid for. It's fun. So I was like, okay. The guy's like, okay, I'll do it. And she's like, before the plumbing, he's like, because he said like, oh, I talked to your husband. Which she was like, no, you didn't. It's like he might have, but who cares? It's like that's a moot point at this point. So she wanted to show her girls. So it's like, hey girls, I'm gonna go catch a demon haunting a highway. And the girls are just standing alone. I was like, whoa. Because they go into school, it's like, yeah, like our health teacher didn't believe us when we said like our mom hunts demons. She's like, well, just tell her like, you know, I'm a psychologist. Like, why? But it's like, yeah, but it's normal. It's like, yeah, but normal is boring. It's like, if your parent like legitimate, be like, yeah, my mom works for the church and hunts demons. It's like, yeah, they're not lying. So, but I think just showing that Kristen's like, yeah, and you know, I'm not gonna shy away. I'm not gonna be meekish. I'm gonna be. I mean. Not like Kristen has ever been meekish, but I think to some extent she, like, maybe from a societal standpoint, she kind of pulls back when she doesn't really need to, just because society kind of, you know. So when she kind of hops in the car being like, no, I'm the one that's going to drive, and then like they're being chased by that thing, she does the U-turn and she's having so much fun. She's like, oh yeah, I'm perfect. They trace the drone. It's a whole bunch of equipment, and Kristen notices the sigil because Ben kept being like, okay, it's circuitry stuff on the front of the truck. Like, that's what that all is. It's not like, it's not one of these sigils. You guys just keep seeing sigils everywhere. It's like, no, this isn't just circuitry. It is a sigil. And Kristen proceeds to smash the stuff up. And I love the guy's like, you could have just asked me to stop. It's like, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to smash your stuff. And they're like, well, he's like, well, I can't just buy more stuff. And they're like, yeah, you can. And I think David said, yeah, and she'll come back here and smash it. So kind of a victory. But we see that home dude, who's a friend of the Vatican, was there. And he's like, I'll clean up. So comes to see David. Turns out this has to deal with the demonic families. So, which I love that they connected, because it wasn't until then I was like, oh, that guy was a successor to his family. It's like, right, we haven't dealt with the successor since that cannibal thing last season. And then they show it's like, right, that guy became the successor to that respective demon family. So they dispose of the bodies because the whole point is you have to eat the previous leader of the family, because that's how you inherit that demon family. But if you get rid of the body, no one can eat it and no one can become the successor. So pretty much that demonic line, that demonic family dies then and there. So the guy, quote unquote, killed himself. They kind of lent a helping hand with that. But they're like, oh, we're the church, we don't do that. And it's like, David doesn't believe the guys. But like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But he's like, yeah, you didn't stop that thing from happening last season. Because if I remember correctly, that cannibal episode was the season finale. Do correct me in the comments down below. I think it was the season finale, but I could be wrong. Because I feel like that was like the very end of the season. Maybe it was definitely near the end of the season. So it was either like episode, because I think last season was last season only 10 episodes? No, I think it was 13. So it was like maybe like 11, 12, or 13, something like that. I feel like it was a season finale, but maybe not. I think I might have brought this up last episode. I think I looked it up that this season is going to be a little shorter. I think it's only 10 to the previous seasons being 13 each, I think. Do, like I said, correct me in the comments. But I want to say, either way, getting back to it, now David looks at all the different families that they've wiped out and is like, okay, so David's like, once we've knocked out all these like families, like what happens in? It's like peace on earth. It's like, well, will you ever actually get to that? You know, and it's like, well, because some families are smaller than others. Like this particular family, that guy belonged to a demonic family that was like a very small one. It's like, yeah, small, but a win is a win. So especially after the cannibal thing last season, it's kind of like, well, you kind of failed to stop that, and now that family that family continues to thrive. So, but at least like every one battle is, you know, a victory in this long going war, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, I think. Well, maybe there's marathon elements to it, but regardless. So that was interesting. Aside from all of this too, there's a continuation of the Andrea thing, which I guess that's going to be a recurring theme and element over the course of the rest of the season is, you know, Leland trying to get her removed. And so it's like, yeah, they confront her like, okay, do you actually see demons? Which I'm almost like, wait, why is she getting chastised for that? The whole point of faith is seeing and believing in what you can't see. If she's seeing demons, isn't that just shown of her strength? But it's also like from a legal standpoint, it's like, we can't have you going on about demons and yada yada yada. But I'm like, it's part of church, and that's why I'm kind of confused, because it's like your belief in God isn't something you can physically see. You can't see God, but she sees something, and now like she's being chastised for that. That's why I might have brought that up last episode. I definitely thought it. I don't know if I brought it up during the review, but I'm like, that's weird. But I guess it's more so like the church has so many legal battles to deal with, you know, with all the priests molesting children. You know, let's not forget about that. So I'm sure there's like settlements and stuff like that, and, you know, shuffling priests around and shit like that. So maybe it's like, right, we're trying to prevent any like malfeasance or like anything that could be a little that could come back to blow back on us. So they try to cut that off at the pass. I mean, especially when you have Leland pulling the strings to do all that, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. So, and it's like, yes, and I even love that when she was talking to Kurt later on, because they were like, oh, you need an outsider to like basically assess her, and I was like, oh, she's going to get Kristen, right? It's like, well, no, because Kristen works for the church, so she actually recommended Kurt because, well, he's seen a demon, which he's like, I don't know what I saw, but she's like, yes, she saw a demon, and she basically says like, oh, I see demons like every hour, and it's like, oh, I didn't know you were seeing them that frequently. But basically she started seeing things when she was 15. She said she hit these very specific keys on a piano and saw a saint who faded away just as the notes did. And you see at home, Kurt tried to do the same thing on his piano just to see. So that's interesting. But David found out about what was going on, so he was present there with it all being what it is. But Andrea has a lot of rights that she doesn't have to. That's why they're doing this whole assessment thing too, because it's like, cool, because she has a lot of legal rights to fight back against any like forced retirement on her part. So, but David, also being a priest, is going to set up some stuff. They're like, you know, because like you need a priest by your side when they do like investigation, like an actual proper investigation into things. And he's like, well, luckily I am a priest, so things are kind of working on that front. I wonder, did Leland, because she's like, oh, you know what that demon is? It's right around you. So that's why I'm like, that's interesting, because I'm wondering, like, I mean, maybe that's just a trick of it all, but like, whenever Leland looked at her last episode, he didn't see the demon. But I guess, like, once again, I don't know if that's supposed to be significant of he's on the outs, or maybe he's like, oh, I see this as an opportunity. Do they not all see each other? Does he not see the demon that's hanging around him, or did he bring that demon in particular just to kind of screw with Andrea even more? I don't know. But, yeah. So I think her legal battle going forward about all this is going to be a continuous arc over the course of this season, because I don't think she's going to win it. I think, sadly, she's going to lose it, and David's not going to have one of his greatest allies by his side with what's coming up, and I think that's the point, to remove a thorn, because Leland hates her. Oh, he hates her so much. I mean, to be fair, she super hates him too, so we'll see how that ends up playing out. I'm very excited to see where all this ends up taking us. You know, David, you know, because of the frequencies and stuff, started to question everything he saw on the highway. Then, you know, Kristen going through in her, like, Sasha Fierce stage. So it's like, is this how, like, once again, is it going to be a persona she kind of adapts every once in a while, or is she going to stay like this for a while? Ben has his sister and her friends to really kind of like help him figure stuff out, you know, because he's kind of sane again and not as like out of his mind as he kind of was last episode. So we'll see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.